It was like any other day. For each individual, it carried with it its own significance. On page 4 of the Hindustan Times published that day from New Delhi, one Mr. B.D. Kapoor wanted to rent a 4-bedroom flat in Connaught Place. On page 7 of the same newspaper, there was an advertisement for a Hind bicycle and another for a Chevrolet car. On the same page, there was a matrimonial ad for a 26-year-old Mathur girl. Ordinary images intertwined with even more mundane ones. In a government office in the capital, a lone bureaucrat typed a document that detailed an inventory of items belonging to the Food and Agriculture Department. A catalogue of government possessions. 600 inkstands, 3 staff cars, 2 sets of sofas, 40 chamber pots. A litany of items which would in some future day expose the unexceptional focus of the bureaucratic mindset, but which today was only proof that a division of family heirlooms was being conducted in a fair and equitable manner. In yet another house in Lutyens, Delhi, only days earlier, a British gentleman, Sir Cyril Radcliffe, had completed redrawing a map of India. He had used red ink to ruthlessly create new boundaries. Now, this map was to become the tangible physical contours of a country. For many individuals, the revising of these lines across a paper would be akin to redrawing the fate lines in their palms. But on this day that year, there also existed a premonition of surreal suffering about to come. It would be born from violence inflicted by man on man, born from the sheer scale of displaced persons as they would move in huge caravans across new borders and old homelands. Others were burning with new ambitions, looking for unexplored vistas, like this young man who had come from Lahore that day to document the historical event with his personal movie camera, and who later set up his family in the well-appointed suites of the Imperial Hotel on Janpath Road. Unlike many of his unfortunate brethren, he was blessed. Har Prasad had a modest family wealth which he had to leave behind. Technically, he was also a refugee, but his assets were his business acumen, something he had managed to ferret away from his old homeland, something which would give him a head start and a chance to build a new foundation. On that day, a cinema hall in Bombay was screening a film starring Raj Kapoor and Madhubala, Neel Kamal, directed by Kedar Sharma. In different parts of the country, members of royal families of erstwhile kingdoms waited for the boundaries of their empires to be erased permanently. Waiting anxiously to be absorbed into a new country which was about to be born. It was the day when the great-grandson of Queen Victoria was determined to make pomp and pageantry the leitmotif of celebration. Epaulets and medals, shining carriages, mounted horsemen resplendent in their uniforms, as he got them ready to transfer the accoutrements of statehood. using symbols of majesty and power at his command. But on that day, there were still many others, like this man in his modest loincloth, now revered and anointed as a Mahatma by the entire world, determined to go on yet another fast. He was protesting against the monstrous sense of inhumanity which had enveloped the nation. And this frail 78-year-old Indian believed that only by punishing his already emaciated body, by inflicting a physical pain on himself, would he be able to purge the entire country of its guilt, if not its insanity.
मेरा ईश्वर तो मेरे दिल के मंदिर में पड़ा है, वहाँ है, और उसका मैं नाम आस्तिक हूँ, तो मैं आपको कहता हूँ कि वो तो जिंदा है, मेरे लिए जिंदा बना।
Like all important days in the calendar of a nation's history, it was also the day when leaders were preparing to address the masses. And this Kashmiri Pandit, whose vision had long been shaped by the inspiring and exotic history of his country, and who had by now managed a psychic link with the people of his nation, was setting to tell in his inimitable, immortal words the appointments he expected them to keep with history. In the words of that Kashmiri Pandit, who was to become the nation's first Prime Minister, a soul of a country long suppressed was finally going to find true utterance. August 1947, 7 a.m. In the village of Rameshwaram, a young 16-year-old boy was dreaming of anything but the sea. He was used to watching his father build boats which the passengers and fishermen used to cross the turbulent seas with. But Abdul Kalam was more excited about the birds. He wanted to fly like these winged creatures. He looked at space and the stars, and he wished to reach for them. On that day of that year, moments before India was being born, Abdul Kalam's dreams could be termed the fantasies of a young imagination. By 1963, this same country had sent its first rocket, built by indigenous technology. By 1980, it had launched its own missiles. And ironically, that young dreamer in that obscure coastal village in Rameshwaram was to become a vital link with this growth of India's science and technology. For Dr. APKJ Abdul Kalam would be mentioned years later as among the pioneers of Indian rocket science. Yet, for thousands like him, when India woke to freedom, they could only dream. Like that young Punjabi refugee we left in the suites of Delhi's Imperial Hotel. Har Prasad was determined to earn back the wealth he had lost when he crossed the border. Displaced from Lahore, he had dreams of becoming an industrialist, to set up factories which would manufacture machinery. In the beginning, he only imported tractors. In the years to come, H.P. Nanda was to manufacture them and set up an industrial empire. By this act, which he undertook in a protected economic environment, he was whether wittingly or otherwise becoming part of a larger national debate. For India was then a country savaged by famines, tortured by hunger and deprivation. These modern machines a young H.P. Nanda was bringing in would become a part of the battle towards agricultural self-reliance. To the young man then, on the 14th of August 1947, his only concern may have been to find a tool for generating wealth. Unknown to him, all this machinery and manufacturing units he would set up in later years would be elements of two visions contending with each other. Visions born out of two convictions deeply felt by two extremely and exceptionally articulate gentlemen. One was for many years the disciple of the other. But Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was as committed to building modern India through technology and science as Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, his spiritual father, was opposed to India imitating the industrial and technological society of the West. 50 years later, modern India is testament as to whose vision prevailed. But this in no way belittles or refutes the philosophy of the great saint. To this day, there are many who feel the folly of having chosen the path of industrialization. It is a debate we'll pick up later. For the moment, let us examine some immediate repercussions of that fateful day in 1947. In August 1947, he was only a minor actor and a struggling playwright, an active member of the IPTA, a formidable organization which preached a strong humanist ideology, frequenting a film society which was then set up by a young advertising executive, Satyajit Ray in Calcutta. But on that momentous Thursday in 1947, Ritwik Ghatak's dilemma was only just to begin. And it started with a physical division of the land, conceived and conducted on his Shonar Bangla. He may not have been aware till much later that the days following the 15th of August 1947 had traumatized his psyche, shaped, some said even colored, his entire creative vision. In the years to come, when he would make critically acclaimed films, every one of them would use this partition as a leitmotif. As a melancholic cry, each of them would be a study of the after effects of this rupture. For Ritwik Ghatak, it may have been a lifelong obsession, this partition of the subcontinent. But even as India was being reorganized, even as its framework was being revised, there were many who would find in this colossal historical saga the stuff of riveting literary and artistic merit. In the years to come, in the works of the likes of Manto, Rajendra Singh Bedi and Bhisham Sahni, the birth of India would be documented in real human terms. Govind Nihalani was barely 7 years old. He lived in Karachi, and the vivid memories of the brutal massacres, of communal carnage, would remain in his subconscious. Almost 40 years later, he would exorcise this ghost in a television serial documenting those harrowing days.
Chalo Jarnail, ise hata nahi yahan se.
When I made Tamas, I was not trying to recreate events. I was trying to recreate a state of mind. I was trying to regain or recreate a sense of fright and fear and insecurity that one felt in those days. When the riot started, there was a terrible sound of the doors and windows being banged shut. I remember that sound very well in that huge building, because we used to stay on the 4th floor of a huge building which had about 90 offices in it and all that, and that belonged to us in Karachi. And it was bang opposite to this famous newspaper in Karachi called Dawn. Okay, so next day I suddenly realized that there was no sound. Everything was very quiet, and for the first time I heard the word called curfew.
The Bombay film industry, already vibrant and creative, already emotionally wedded to the concept of an independent nation. By the 14th of August 1947, this industry had a significant migrant population from Peshawar and Punjab. In the studios in Bombay and Pune, the likes of Prithviraj Kapoor, Sunil Dutt, Balraj Sahni, Dev Anand and Yusuf Khan, who was better known by his screen name of Dilip Kumar, were already making a mark. They had come to Bombay and settled in this port city along the Arabian Sea much before there was tinsel in this tinsel town. And on the 14th of August 1947, they had all pledged, some consciously and others perhaps unconsciously, never to go back. In the next 50 years, this collection of migrants from Punjab and many others from other parts of the country helped in founding one of the world's most exciting and largest cinema-producing centres. The theme of their films may be termed escapist entertainment, but these films were already addressing social issues, the integration of communities, the evil of the caste system. But more importantly, in almost every one of them, there were subterranean messages for freedom and independence. In some, this message was very overt. For this young woman, the 14th of August 1947 would be the redemption of a pledge. A few years earlier, she had taken a different path, followed a different leader whose mesmeric charm preached an ideology diametrically opposite to those who believed in Gandhi's non-violence. Captain Lakshmi Swaminathan was the leader of the Rani Jhansi Brigade, a part of the Indian National Army founded by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Lakshmi Swaminathan was convinced, as were the thousands who served in the INA, that freedom could only be won through the barrel of a gun. But Lakshmi Swaminathan was only one face of the Indian woman. On the 14th of August 1947, she was more the exception than the rule. The country's mythology, its religion deified goddesses, but in the villages, in the cities, in the urban slums, women were yet to be emancipated. In the coming decades, one of the challenges faced by independent India was to restore this dignity to half of its population. In the coming decades, one woman would even reach the highest elected post in the country. In the coming years, many other women would symbolize the unshackling of the female gender. But in the decades to come, the gender equality would still remain a debatable and contentious issue. It was within this tentative, almost contradictory milieu, on the midnight of the 14th of August 1947, as the clock welcomed the 15th of August, the Union Jack, representing colonialism, was lowered, and the tricolour, representing the new nation's liberty, its pride and symbol, was finally hoisted. And amidst the blowing of conch shells, power transferred from the might of alien rulers living thousands of miles away to the 330 million who were now masters of their own destiny.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially.
What was born was a multi-religious, multi-racial, multilingual India. Yet, beneath all this euphoria was the unstated tension of the communal carnage waiting to explode, of the hostility which would in the next few months create rivers of blood. In the coming decades, India would be haunted with numerous such challenges. But ironically, it faced one of the greatest of this intimidation only 5 months after it won its freedom. On the 30th of January 1948, 3 bullets fired from the gun of a fanatic would assassinate the most powerful petitioner for ahimsa.
बहादुर की अहिंसा का पास तो तब हो सकता है कि मुझको कोई मेरा खून करे और तो भी बहादुर की नहीं हुई, कोई मेरा कर देंगे उसमें बंदरी क्या बहादुरी आएगी, लेकिन हाँ तब भी मेरे दिल में ऐसा ही रहे कि हे ईश्वर तू उसका भी भला कर.
Mahatma Gandhi's death would take away from the center stage the man who could have given the country's destiny a different emphasis. It is a theoretical issue whether his death took the country on an alternate course. Yet, others who had been his apprentices had already taken over the helm of affairs. They were all men with impeccable credentials. In the coming years, they would teach the nation how to cope with self-reliance, to conceive its own agenda, to overcome difficulties and obstacles, to fight demons it had created along the way, and some which it had inherited. Along the path, India would fight many relentless battles for social justice and inequality, against obscurantism and fanaticism, as it attempted to redeem the pledge it had made to itself. And along the path there would be milestones of accomplishments which the nation could collectively be proud of. India's freedom struggle itself was an inspiration for many countries struggling to win liberty from their colonial masters. And later, when the world was full of insanity, India's was perhaps the only sane voice which could be heard and was even heeded. It was its achievements and its setbacks, in striving to come to terms with itself, with its pluralistic composition, the transition of our social structure, the pillars of our democracy, among them the parliament and the judiciary, which defined the true meaning of its tryst with destiny. After all, in the 50 years since that fateful day of the 14th of August 1947, and subsequently the triumphant freedom on the 15th of August, India was and is still a nation in the making, still keeping its various appointments with history. Some of the images of people we met earlier are archetypes, icons whose personal stories trigger a debate on fundamental issues we are attempting to explore. There are millions like them all over the country, and many more, in whose anecdotes are stored the seeds of a continuous saga.